We grew up in them.
Space Invaders, that was great. The games I really loved were Asteroids, Missile Command, and above all, Defender.
But I loved Robotron. I thought that was a really fantastic game.
And they made a fortune, 25 cents at a time.
We're talking about in 1981, Americans dropped 20 billion quarters into arcade machines.
They were the gaming world.
It was really weird because it wasn't like a kid phenomenon. It was like really across-the-board phenomenon.
Well, they popped up everywhere.
But all good things come to an end.
It was a fad. I think there's no other way to put it until finally, the whole thing just sort of collapsed under its own weight.
This is the story of the birth and fall of the arcade industry. Starting as far back as the late 1800s, penny arcade machines such as strength testers and peep shows dot local pubs and fairgrounds. In 1927, David Gottlieb creates Baffle Ball, the precursor to the modern pinball machine. His simple game sparks the pinball craze. Soon, the mini arcades that grew out of the Great Depression are packed with pinball machines. For decades, pinball rules the arcades. But in 1971, a man named Nolan Bushnell changes everything.
He wasn't much of an engineer, but he had these great ideas for doing businesses. He saw how he could take the technology we were using at Ampex and make a coin-operated amusement device that might be a hit. He then built this thing called Computer Space. Computer Space was not a great marketing success.
Computer Space was a monumental flop. They made 1,000 copies of it. They didn't sell all 1,000 copies of it. It wasn't popular. It didn't make it to very many venues, and where it did make it, it wasn't very popular.
So he challenged me to do a ping pong game, a very simple, one moving spot. Nothing could be simpler.
Al got it to the point where it just had the two paddles, and it was knocking the ball back and forth, and it was so much fun. I said, stop. We don't need to go to the next step.
In 1972, the first Pong machine is placed in Andy Capp's pub in Sunnyvale, and from there, it becomes the world's first huge video game success. The average Pong machine pulls in $100 a week in quarters.
Oh my God, it's everywhere. Oh, I go, oh God, what have I done?
Soon, Atari isn't the only big company making coin-operated video games. Cinematronics makes a name for itself by releasing a number of successful vector games.
A vector game, or a vector display, actually just takes a single beam and the programmer, or hardware, directs it to go to this point, and that draws a line.
Among their releases is the world's first cooperative game, Rip-Off, created by Tim Skelly in 1980.
Rip-Off was something that we'd come up with just in kicking around some names for a game, and I had something that was kind of almost like centipedes in the back of my head. And I just decided that it would be more interesting if, instead of shooting at each other, that they both shot at the enemy. And believe it or not, market research said that cooperation amongst young people had become a major factor. And I thought, well, that's great. That fits right into my plans. So we made a cooperative game, and it became just a huge success and a great deal of fun to play.
But the true arrival of the arcade is brought about by three key games. The first of these is Space Invaders, which is released in 1978.
Space Invaders actually had gameplay that was interesting and actually had a scoring modality, so a person could get a score and you could compete with someone else and compare your scores, and therefore a person could become, quote, a video game champion. So Space Invaders was like the first game in this 3-game progression.
With Asteroids following close behind.
Asteroids, it was me for project leader. There was only one programmer. There was a technician, the electrical engineer. I did the art, just line drawings basically, all the fonts and stuff. That was basically an entire team. Lyle Raines called me in his office and said, we had this game called Cosmos, I think it was, where it was a big rock on the screen. The idea was to shoot the other player, but the rock was in the way and people kept shooting the rock, and he said, well, they kept shooting the rock, nothing happens. Why don't we put rocks on the screen and the player blows them up? And I said, that sounds like an interesting idea. Also, we need something to make the players come out more, so I suggested a saucer that would come out and take a shot at the player if he didn't do anything or if the number of rocks got real low. I just went out and did it, so within a few weeks I had things floating around the screen.
And Asteroids suddenly had further enhanced gameplay where people could get very high scores, and also got the competition going for people playing against each other in a bigger way than Space Invaders started for high score laurels.
And then, Pac-Man is unleashed.
But the final thing that really got it going was the third game in this progression, and that's Pac-Man. When Pac-Man came out, it caused everybody to fall in love with video games. Men, women, children, professional people, anybody, any walk of life, any age, became enamored with video games, and Pac-Man single-handedly brought the entire female audience into the arcade. At the same time, because of its uniqueness and because of its incredible across-spectrum appeal,
Pac-Man was hit everywhere it went, right off the bat.
The success of Pac-Man, Asteroids, and Space Invaders opens the floodgates for the arcade revolution. And the gaming world will soon become more successful than anyone ever dreamed.